Boss sneaks up on housekeeper, discovers amazing truth that transforms everything in just 7 days. Lisa fidgeted with her apron, the fabric soft but worn from years of scrubbing floors and dusting desks. At 34, she often felt like an invisible thread weaving through Maplewood, steady, diligent, but overlooked. Each day was a grueling balance of managing her demanding job as a housekeeper at a prestigious law firm and caring for her 2 young children. She relentlessly pushed aside dreams of finishing her education, burying ambitions under the weight of deadlines and laundry. Mr. Thompson, her supervisor, strode through the offices with a confidence that seemed to elevate him above everyone, not at all aware of the quiet storm brewing inside Lisa. She admired him from a distance, his polished presence never acknowledging the sweat and tears she poured into keeping the firm running. His dismissal stung, mistaking her kindness for complacency. Just as she began gathering her thoughts for the day, she felt a flicker of hope. What if she could finally share her ideas? Her pulse quickened. She had been drafting a legal document aimed at helping low-income families, a piece of work she poured her heart into after hours, in stolen moments between household chores. It could transform lives. Yet doubts gnawed at her. Would anyone take her seriously? The voice told her to stay in her lane, to accept her place. Before she could spiral further into her self-doubt, the sound of footsteps interrupted her. Mr. Thompson, unaware of his looming intrusion, entered the break room, his brow furrowed. As he flipped through the papers strewn across the table, Lisa felt her anxiety spike. This was her secret. Her hands trembled slightly against the parchment. Would he see her for what she really was, or merely as the cleaning lady? Before they locked eyes, Lisa wrestled with an overwhelming mix of vulnerability and defiance. "Why can't I just be enough?" she muttered under her breath, muscles taut as she fought the urge to reclaim her privacy. Would he mock her? Dismiss her like she always feared? Yet there was a pulse of hope buried deep, a flicker that maybe, just maybe, he could see her differently. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Her heart raced at the thought of sharing her work. She could feel her throat tighten. What if the room was silent and they dismissed every single word? Awkwardness would drown her, and she'd become just another housekeeper in a suit of invisibility. Amidst this turmoil, as their eyes locked, a shift in tension crackled like electricity. Mr. Thompson knew he held a key he had never considered. At that moment, standing in stark contrast to his usual superiority, a sliver of recognition began to dawn on him. But as the questions thundered in Lisa's mind, what would happen next? Would he finally see her? Or would she remain the overlooked thread in the fabric of the firm, unraveled and discarded? The thunderous silence of their standoff grew thick, a storm brewing, just as they would either bond or tear apart. Time hung in that tension-filled air, a precarious balance on the edge of change. Would either of them be brave enough to embrace the unimaginable? The weight of silence settled heavily upon Lisa, challenging her to confront her fears. Mr. Thompson's gaze bore into her, a mixture of curiosity and caution. She sensed the pivotal moment hanging in the air, laden with possibilities. The walls of the break room felt both confining and liberating, the stark fluorescent lights illuminating her hesitation and resolve in equal measure. With a deep breath, Lisa willed herself to break the silence. "Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice unsteady but determined. "I've been working on something. A legal document aimed at helping families like mine who struggle to find affordable representation." His brow furrowed deeper, a flicker of interest flashed across his features, yet uncertainty clouded his expression. "You mean to tell me you've been drafting legal documents? Here? Without prior approval?" "I know it sounds strange," she rushed to explain. The words flowed faster, a rush of pent-up ambition finally breaking free. but I've seen so many families get lost in the system. I thought, if I could create something clear and accessible, it could make a difference. He scrutinized her, his posture shifting from incredulous to contemplative. Lisa could feel the boundaries of her world expanding, yet a flicker of self-doubt surged back. This could spiral. Could she bear another dismissal? Not just professionally, but personally too. I understand the intent, but we don't have the resources or time to look into this properly, he finally said, his tone cautious. It felt like being plunged back into a pool of ice-cold water, but Lisa felt a spark ignite deep within. Please, Mr. Thompson, before you write this off, allow me to show you what I've done. I spent nights working on it. His eyes narrowed slightly, the gears of his mind visibly turning. She could see him grappling with his instinct to dismiss her, and the dawning realization that perhaps there was more to this housekeeper than he had ever considered. Days passed, drawn out like an age, as Lisa's mind buzzed with anticipation and trepidation. She had emailed him the draft, all her hopes pinned on the prospect of a response. Each reply notification sent her heart into a brief frenzy, only to deflate when she found it was spam mail or a colleague's mundane inquiry. She began to observe Mr. Thompson in the office corridors, a figure who was once distant, now a complex puzzle she was determined to understand. With each passing day, the dynamics changed. Her invisible presence began to shift into something tangible. There was a quiet confidence knitted into her movements, a pride she had never embraced spilling over like sunlight breaking through clouds. Finally, a week after her bold move, the moment arrived. As she was tidying up the conference room, Mr. Thompson entered with a stack of papers in hand, his demeanor different from before. There was respect in his stride. I read your proposal, he said, his voice steady but not harsh. It has merit that we can build on. However, there are some logistical hurdles we would need to address before moving forward. I want you to come to the next meeting. We need your insight. Lisa's breath hitched in her throat. This wasn't merely a nod to her work. It was an acknowledgement of her, and of what she could bring to the firm. She felt an unfamiliar thrill. She was finally stepping out of the shadows. Yet, lurking beneath the excitement was a disquieting realization. This breakthrough demanded more of her than she had ever anticipated. She would have to wrestle with her own self-perception, the doubts that had anchored her for years, and the expectations now set forth before her. As she smiled tentatively at Mr. Thompson, anticipation mixed with anxiety swirled within her. The journey ahead promised challenges she might not be ready for, but the fire within her ignited with purpose. Would the new path bring validation or deeper conflict? With each day on the horizon, the stakes would rise. The moment of truth loomed. How would she harness her hidden capabilities without losing herself in the process? The days leading up to the meeting felt like an eternity, as Lisa juggled both her regular tasks and the anxiety of her impending first step into the professional light. It was unsettling to contend with the emotional weight of her ambitions and the jagged edges of self-doubt that had for so long defined her existence. Every evening after her shift, she set herself at the small desk in her cramped apartment, surrounded by remnants of her old life. The stack of unpaid bills, the vibrant drawings her son had made, reflecting untainted hopes. In those quiet moments, she wrestled with the feelings swirling within her. What was she really capable of? Would the others in the firm truly listen to her? A document doesn't speak for itself, she muttered, fidgeting with the corners of her proposal. I have to speak for it. True enough. She would need to not only present the legal document, but defend its worth in an environment that had often marginalized her. As the day of the meeting drew near, she rehearsed not just the details of the document, but the cadence and conviction in her voice that she would have to embrace. The past echoed with memories of her timidity, yet she began to envision the advocate she yearned to be. The morning of the meeting arrived, stilling her nerves for just a moment with an unexpected wave of resolve. Lisa arrived early, her heart pounding a rhythm that urged her forward. The conference room stood stark and intimidating, but she shut her eyes and inhaled deeply, picturing herself as a pivotal force ready to change the trajectory of countless families. As the others filed in, she caught furtive glances and murmurs, fragments of conversation that hinted at their skepticism. Just a housekeeper. One voice whispered, "What does she know?" The implications hung heavy in the air, stinging like a slap in the face. She reminded herself of Mr. Thompson's encouraging nod, of how her proposal had been recognized, of her hard work. The fear tried to crush her, but she stoked the embers of her determination. It was time to dismantle the doubts, brick by brick. When the meeting commenced, she noticed her hands tremble at first, the details blurred in her mind like an unfinished painting. But as Mr. Thompson introduced her, commending her efforts, her focus sharpened. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity," Lisa began, her voice breaking slightly before she steadied it. "What I have prepared addresses systemic issues many families encounter when seeking legal support. My goal was to create something practical and accessible." As she outlined the structure of her document, a gradual metamorphosis unfolded. She saw Mr. Thompson engrossed, nods from colleagues around the room responding positively. Each point she made seemed to peel away layers of her self-doubt, bearing a truth she had almost forgotten. The competence within her began to rise, unencumbered by past constraints. But as questions emerged from her peers, a barrage of challenges and expectations, it became clear the journey was just beginning. Their curiosity brewed into skepticism, revealing deeper insidious biases that questioned her authority. The initial thrill spiraled into a stark realization that judgment lurked, hungry to undermine her contributions. "Your insights are valuable," one colleague countered, "but how do we know this is a viable solution?" The words pricked at her, fragments of her haunting fears surfacing. Would she finally forge ahead, confronting this skepticism, both within her and from those around her? Lisa paused, heart racing, aware that this was the crucible of her transformation. She met the gaze of her detractor, and rather than retreating, she leaned in. "I may have started as a housekeeper, but I understand the legal gaps because I've lived them. This proposal will empower those families, my family." The room fell uncomfortably silent, the impact of her words reverberating like the calm after a storm. An urgent tide surged within her, a call to rise against years of invisibility. The foundation of her identity was shattering, and in its place, something powerful began to form. As the meeting unfolded, Lisa realized she stood at the precipice of change, not just for her proposal, but for herself. Would she navigate the challenges and claim her place among the unyielding voices of the firm? The tension in the air thickened, a resolution loomed ahead, yet uncertainty knotted her stomach. What radical obstacles would she face next? The aftermath of the meeting left an electrifying buzz in the air. Lisa walked out of the conference room, heart racing, pulse pounding in her ears. The skeptical gazes had been disorienting, but the weight of speaking her truth felt liberating. As she navigated the hallways, a heady mix of triumph and anxiety coursed through her, fueling her next steps. For days, the office atmosphere shifted, whispers swirling around her like a relentless storm. Yet, as the initial shock of her assertiveness faded, she began to sense a shift within herself. Lisa reflected. She had risen to the challenge, confronted the biases, and articulated her vision. This revelation ignited a drive she had long buried under years of self-doubt. Determined to build on this momentum, Lisa spent her evenings diving deeper into research, unearthing data about systemic inequalities in legal access. Each fact she uncovered sharpened her perspective, revealing gaps that were personal to her experience. She crafted follow-up points for future discussions, eager to dismantle any remaining skepticism lazily disguised as inquiry. At the same time, shadows of doubt still loomed. Would her peers accept her evolving role? Would they appreciate her relentless pursuit of knowledge? Or would they see her as merely an imposter in unfamiliar territory? In the days following the meeting, Lisa found solace in her workspace, often sitting with Mr. Thompson, whose support had been unwavering. He became not just a mentor, but a guide, stimulating her insights and challenging her to refine her proposals. "Remember, Lisa," he asserted one day, gesturing toward her research notes, "confidence isn't the absence of fear. It's the willingness to act despite it." His calm assurance nudged her to venture further out of her comfort zone. Soon enough, she was asked to lead a workshop, sharing her proposal with even wider circles. The thought sent a seismic tremor through her gut, but she steeled herself against the surge of panic. That evening, Lisa prepared meticulously, rehearsing the delivery of her supporting data and the personal anecdotes that rendered her proposal compelling. As she practiced, she increasingly sensed an internal shift. The housekeeper in her was blending with an emerging figure of authority and insight. When the day of the workshop arrived, the room was filled with her colleagues, curious yet guarded. The familiar skepticism returned, simmering beneath the surface. It was palpable. Taking a deep breath, Lisa stood before them, grounded by the knowledge that this moment was not just about presenting a proposal. It was about asserting her identity, the duality she juggled. She opened with a personal story, allowing her vulnerability to interlace with her professional message. Many of us in this room have faced barriers, she began. But those barriers are aspects of a larger system that often overlooks voices like mine. I won't forget where I come from, nor can I ignore the urgency of addressing these issues. Questions flowed. Some were supportive, probing on practical implementation, while others signaled reluctance, echoing previous doubts. The tightrope she walked became increasingly challenging, but in that moment, Lisa recognized a power within herself, echoing Mr. Thompson's wisdom. When a colleague posed a particularly harsh critique, something shifted. Instead of retreating, she met his criticism with a thoughtful rebuttal, seamlessly weaving in her data-driven insights. This isn't just my story, it's a narrative shared by countless families who struggle every day. Denying their experiences only perpetuates the cycle of neglect. Staring him down, she sensed a release within. The confidence fortified inside her. Afterward, the room buzzed with charged conversations, her colleagues engaging with the material she had laid out. The shift was palpable, opening doors that had once appeared permanently closed. As the workshop concluded, Lisa felt an exhilarating mixture of relief and exhilaration. She recognized now that her journey was far from over. She had ignited something in the firm and within herself. Yet, uncertainty lurked at the periphery of her triumph. What would her next challenge entail? Would her newfound voice sustain its power in the face of inevitable backlash? In that moment, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in a window. Stronger, more resolute. With determination hardening into resolve, she prepared for the next encounter, a meeting with the firm's partners to discuss her proposal's potential. This time, she wouldn't just present, she would transform skepticism into dialogue. The only question now was, could she confront the partners' ultimate scrutiny and emerge victorious? Or would this be another hurdle that could shatter her fragile confidence? The day of the partners' meeting arrived with an intensity that Lisa had never experienced before. The conference room loomed large as she stepped inside, the polished table a stark reminder of the hierarchy she was determined to navigate. Her palms were clammy, and her heart raced with impatience. Lisa took a deep breath, reminding herself of Mr. Thompson's words about confidence. "Act despite the fear," she murmured, grounding herself as she took her seat. The partners shuffled in, their presence weighed heavily in the room. They muted whispers fluttered about, their expressions a blend of skepticism and curiosity. Lisa focused on her notes, but moments from the past workshop flashed in her mind where she had successfully commanded the room. Every pivotal moment fueled her resolve. As she began her presentation, Lisa felt the familiar tremor of nerves ripple through her. But she had armed herself with not only her data, but also emotional anecdotes that bridged the gap between her personal and professional worlds. As she shared her proposal, she noticed the partners leaning in, the tension slowly shifting toward engagement. "You've compiled impressive research," remarked Ms. Caldwell, an astute partner known for her sharp insights. "But do you truly believe your proposal can enact change?" The question hung in the air, thick with implications. Lisa swallowed hard, but knew this was her moment. "I don't just believe it can enact change, I know it must." She shared her vision, articulating how systemic barriers hindered meaningful access to justice for clients who were often overlooked. As she spoke, she could feel the mounting apprehension in the room transform into curiosity. Yet, a familiar misgiving surfaced. She sensed one partner, Mr. Jenkins, with his significant stature and piercing gaze, ready to strike with doubts. When he finally interjected, the spotlight turned harsh, and her heart threatened to sink. "Your proposal sounds noble, but how can someone as unproven as yourself someone new to this environment, assure us of results. His skepticism was a calculated jab meant to undermine her confidence. Instead of crumbling, Lisa's internal conflict shifted like a tectonic plate beneath her. Her voice steadied. Mr. Jenkins, until recently, I was a housekeeper in these very halls, witnessing firsthand the struggles of those we represent. My experiences, combined with the research I've done, offer a unique perspective. Ignoring that would be a disservice to our clients. With each subsequent rebuttal from Jenkins, Lisa fought to respond with poise, continually linking her professional aspirations to the lived experiences of those around her. She knew she was battling for more than just a proposal. It was about carving out her place in a space that had long excluded voices like hers. The discussion broadened. Colleagues began to chime in, engaging in a dialogue that weighed the merits of her ideas. Each voice stepping up was fuel to her fire, bolstering her confidence as Lisa navigated the conversation like a skilled pilot, adjusting to turbulent skies. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, but when the meeting wrapped up, she felt a swell of empowerment. The partners were not entirely on board, but they were intrigued. Lisa had met skepticism with vision, doubt with conviction. As the partners filed out, murmurs of support echoed among her peers. It was incremental, but movement had begun. The question now loomed larger than ever. She had opened a door, but could she push it wide enough to usher in the systemic change she envisioned? Back at her desk, Lisa felt the weight of back-to-back challenges at her heels. The stakes were rising, and with them, the urgency of executing her vision became palpable. But the ringing doubt remained. What if the path forward held unforeseen obstacles she wasn't prepared to face? In the stillness of the office, a new thought sparked. She could engage those partners as allies, turning their skepticism into shared ambitions. The budding relationships needed nurturing, but first, she would test the boundaries of her voice. The next step was clear. She needed to establish an open dialogue with the partners, yet she sensed resistance lurking. What would that dialogue expose, and could she handle a confrontation that might unearth secrets within the institution she sought to transform? As she leaned back in her chair, a resolve crystallized. She would navigate this path with both conviction and courage. The challenge ahead was monumental, but in the back of her mind, she felt the thrill of possibility. The only certainty was that the real battle was just beginning. How far could she push against the tides of tradition, and what truths lay unexamined beneath the layers of doubt? The following morning, Lisa approached her desk with renewed determination. The partners' mixed reception echoed in her mind, provoking a mix of excitement and anxiety. She replayed her remarks, dissecting each moment for vulnerabilities. What would she have done differently? Tension brewed within her, as she envisioned confronting Mr. Jenkins and reframing the very nature of their skeptics. She grabbed her planner and began drafting a strategy. It was clear she could not merely react to their questions. She needed to be proactive. A plan began to form. She decided to invite the partners for informal discussions on how their insights could intertwine with her vision. It was a bold move, one that had the potential to foster alliances where there were divisions. A brief message to Ms. Caldwell set the stage for an initial gathering. It struck Lisa as a brilliant opportunity, not just a risk. She was determined to frame the conversation around possibilities instead of barriers, turning skepticism into collaboration. Yet a gnawing doubt lingered. What if they brushed off her invitation? By mid-afternoon, Ms. Caldwell replied, her tone surprisingly receptive. Encouraged, Lisa prepared to share her thoughts with a small group of partners. As anticipation surged, the wave of potential camaraderie tantalized her. The day of their informal meeting arrived, and she stood outside the conference room inhaling deeply. The table lay empty, but seemed to pulse with latent energy. Today, it would serve as a platform for transformation, not an arena for skepticism. As the partners filed in, their expressions were unreadable. This was a different sort of gathering. They were not reviewing proposals, but engaging in dialogue. Lisa initiated with light anecdotes about her past, seamlessly weaving her lived experiences into the narrative. She felt the room pulse with unspoken tension, but she pressed on, determined to unravel it. This isn't just about numbers, it speaks to the very essence of our mission, she asserted, looking around the room. It's essential that we create an environment where authentic voices are a part of the conversation. Ms. Caldwell leaned forward, intrigued. You've convincingly articulated the why, but how do we manage the how? What specific framework can we build? Lisa felt the heat of Mr. Jenkins's gaze, ready to pounce. Yet she sensed a shift in the atmosphere, as if curiosity triumphed over contempt. We start small. I propose pilot initiatives to engage the communities we often overlook, she replied, her voice steady. We can implement feedback loops directly connecting us to the issues our clients face. The response was varied. Some partners nodded thoughtfully, others frowned, mulling over potential pitfalls. Lisa seized the moment to quell their doubts, articulating the gradual nature of change, emphasizing the need for commitment over grandiose announcements. Every little change we enact has the potential to create ripples, she insisted. Yet Mr. Jenkins's skepticism crept back in, churning in the depth of her confidence. And if the pilot fails? He countered, his tone edged with authority. We risk the firm's reputation. Failure is merely another opportunity to learn, Lisa retorted, her frustration teasing the edges of her composure. If we shy away from taking risks, we remain stagnant. The room grew silent, tension wrapping around them. She could feel the stakes rising, understood that failure wouldn't merely reflect on them but would haunt her personally, an unbearable burden. In that moment, the importance of transparency hit her. We have to be willing to pivot if something does not work, she continued. That's part of any growth process. An unexpected voice cut through her thoughts. Ms. Caldwell agreed. Perhaps risk management could be a part of the framework Lisa proposes. We need to redefine what failure looks like for us. This is vital. A hesitant nod from Jenkins told her they were moving. But her battle wasn't over. It was merely transitioning into a different phase. Internally, Lisa braced herself for deeper confrontations. What had begun as a drive to gain acceptance had forged into a collective vision, yet the narrative was far from settled. With alliances budding, a thought lingered. The deeper she delved into these conversations, the more she uncovered about the institution's layers and played into its vulnerabilities. As she wrapped up, a blend of hope and caution bubbled within her. The stakes had transformed yet again. With some partners willing to take the leap with her, what further revelations lay ahead? How far could she push before the system pushed back? Would the truths waiting beneath the surface ultimately be her greatest weapon or the source of insurmountable conflict? The air was thick with anticipation as Lisa returned to her desk, the informal meeting still reverberating in her mind. Flashes of the partners' expressions flickered before her, and she could almost feel the gravity of Ms. Caldwell's supportive words. Yet lurking beneath this boost of encouragement was a more profound realization. Transformation, whether personal or institutional, inevitably demanded sacrifice. The question loomed. Was she ready to pay that price? She glanced at her planner, the ink detailing her potential next steps feeling less rigid and more fluid. The pilot projects were slated to take shape soon, and her mind raced with ways to cultivate enthusiasm among the partners. Even small victories could lead to substantial change. However, she couldn't shake the deeper undertones of Jenkins's skepticism. It echoed of previous defeats she'd witnessed firsthand. Was she merely courting another dismissal? Lisa's resolve hardened. Defiance bubbled within her, igniting a spark in her chest. She would not allow herself to be paralyzed by the fear of failure. Instead, she began dissecting the internal workings of the firm. What made Jenkins tick? What were the voids in his experience that she could address? Understanding this would be crucial not just for their dealings, but also for her own growth. With calculated risk in mind, she crafted a list, a deep dive into not only their current strategies, but her partners' backgrounds. She envisioned formalizing mentorship to precede the pilot programs, matching the experienced partners with less seasoned ones to maximize insight and innovation. Her fingers danced across the keyboard as she outlined a presentation to push this agenda forward. Days passed in a flurry of action, punctuated by moments of self-doubt when she considered how they might react to these proposals. Lisa could hear the faint echoes of their doubts surfacing again, a lingering dread that this was just another overzealous attempt she would ultimately have to defend. Every suggestion felt like a gamble weighing heavily on her shoulders. On her way to work one morning, she spotted a local bookstore. The thought of losing herself in a world of fiction briefly alleviated her worries, but she shook her head, deciding against it. There was no time for distractions. Instead, she turned that wish to escape into time spent seeking material on successful organizational change. Books filled with images of leaders who had defied the odds. Each page filled her with fresh determination. When she arrived at the office the next day, she sensed a shift. The atmosphere felt less critical and more curious. Perhaps the initial meeting had laid the groundwork for a more open dialogue. Encouraged, she decided to probe deeper, hosting a roundtable where even the quietest partners could weigh in. She crafted conversation starters that appealed to their experiences, mindful of their credentials. The meeting unfolded with a surprising warmth, laughter bubbling between the discussions. This was not the stifling environment of hierarchies where dissenting opinions felt dangerous. Partners leaned in, sharing their own anxieties about innovation, voices rising in a manner that was nearly conspiratorial. Lisa could feel the collective itch for change, a hunger she hadn't fully anticipated. However, beneath the collaborative spirit, shadows brewed. Jenkins sat quietly, his expression inscrutable. What revolution stirred beneath that stoic facade? Lisa could feel the weight of his gaze, potent enough to disrupt this newfound alliance. Despite the success of the dialogue, she instinctively knew his approval remained pivotal. As her presentation concluded, she noticed how stakeholders seemed reinforced by the exchanged ideas, yet doubts lingered in her heart. What kind of conflict might arise when the atmosphere shifted back to contentious relationships, when ideas morphed into accusations? With mounting urgency, Lisa leaned into her newfound grasp of potential collaboration and self-determination, yet apprehension coiled tightly within her at the thought of Jenkins's looming disapproval. The moment of clarity came when she recalled Ms. Caldwell's words about redefining failure. Suddenly, a dreadful truth strung together all her tensions. It wasn't only Jenkins she needed to address, but herself. Participation breeds accountability, and if she was truly committed to this change, it would require not just a change in others, but a transformation in herself. Having opened doors, she now had a decision to make. Would she walk through them, embracing the tumultuous path that awaited, or would she backtrack into her comfort zone to placate fears? That singular moment, when everything hung in a balance, would illuminate her strengths and weaknesses. As she prepared to confront these truths, an unexpected email notification flashed across her screen, slowing her heart. It was from Jenkins. What awaited her in that message could either solidify her journey or dismantle it altogether. Would she face him head-on, unveiling herself in all her vulnerability, or retreat into safer quarters? Setting her jaw, she braced herself for the revelation that awaited. Lisa's heart raced as she opened Jenkins's email. The decisive moment hung like a pendulum, oscillating between anxiety and anticipation. The words writhed on the screen, almost taunting her with their implications. As she read, her initial excitement deflated like a balloon, leaving only confusion in its wake. Jenkins requested a one-on-one meeting, explicitly stating he wanted to discuss her recent proposals, but underlined with a tone that suggested skepticism. She closed the laptop and sat back in her chair, enveloped in a mix of dread and determination. Was he merely calling her in to shoot down her ideas, or was this a pivotal moment for real dialogue? The uncertainty twisted in her gut, igniting a fire beneath the surface. There was no room for ambiguity now. She had to prepare. With a sense of urgency, she balanced her ambition against her fear and pulled out her whiteboard. A decision bubbled within her. She would not face Jenkins as the uncertain employee grappling for validation, but as a changemaker ready to forge a path through adversity. For the next few hours, Lisa meticulously drafted notes outlining not just her proposals, but also potential solutions for the challenges she anticipated Jenkins would raise. She used those moments to transition her fears into action. If he attacked her plans based on potential risk, she would counter with evidence and case studies that demonstrated the benefits of mentorship programs. As the day wore on, Lisa's creativity surged. A potential countermeasure emerged. What if she invited Jenkins to engage more deeply with her vision? Instead of defending her ideas alone, why not create an opportunity for him to contribute? Perhaps his perceptions held value that could be transformed into a mutual investment in their goals. When she finished her preparation, the clock indicated it was time for a confrontation she no longer dreaded, but anticipated. A quick mental pep talk, a reflection of Ms. Caldwell's supportive words, and the truth that she owed it to herself. This was a moment to stand tall. Entering Jenkins's office, she took a deep breath, seeking grounding. The room radiated a distinct aloofness, the air caught between professionalism and personal scrutiny. Jenkins glanced up from his desk, his expression inscrutable. "Lisa," he acknowledged, motioning for her to take a seat. The tone lacked warmth but was not cold, an opening perhaps. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, feeling the momentum of commitment surging within her voice. "I've reflected on the roundtable discussion and wanted to dive deeper into the feedback. I think there are specific ways we can leverage our partners' insights to refine the pilot projects." Jenkins raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly in what might have been a smirk. "Interesting approach. Most would come in prepared to defend their ideas. You seem quite ready to pivot." Her heart hammered but steadied. "I've come to understand that collaboration is paramount. The partners have expressed their hesitations, but it's an opportunity for us to bridge those gaps rather than dismiss them. Wouldn't tapping into their doubts allow us to build stronger foundations?" He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, an expression of contemplation passing over his face. "That might just be the most convincing argument I've heard all week. But how do you plan to address partners' fears and concerns head-on without losing their trust?" Lisa felt a flicker of hope, a chance for this moment to evolve from confrontation into collaboration. "We can use their apprehensions as a catalyst for change. Instead of calling out weaknesses, let's frame our approach around active participation. By guiding these discussions, we could harness their input and develop tailored solutions. I'd like for us to create smaller, focused sessions right before our pilot program launches." Jenkins studied her intently, a spark of interest illuminating his otherwise guarded attitude. "And if they resist?" "Then we learn," she countered, the determination rising. "We refine our approach in real time. Participation breeds accountability. By encouraging dialogue, we elevate the investment in these initiatives. If I may be candid, I believe a collaborative spirit could be what the firm lacks." For a fleeting moment, she saw a glimmer of respect flashing across his features. It fired her resolve. This wasn't just about the meeting, it was about creating a shift, both in the firm and in herself. She realized Jenkins held within him the potential to either obstruct or bolster her ambitions. Which personality would emerge, she wondered. The silence drew out like a taut string. Finally he spoke, his voice low yet firm. "So you're not backing down then? You seem to have a vision, but this could completely redefine how we operate. Are you ready for what that entails?" But her instincts whispered that the question was not merely rhetorical. Lisa understood this was a moment of reciprocal vulnerability, and she wasn't ready to retreat. "Absolutely. But only if we do it together. The firm needs a unified front, impacted not just by strategy, but by a shared commitment to evolve." The tension in the room was palpable, the possibility of conflict layered with the chance of alliance. As Jenkins's gaze held hers, a reckoning began between them, the stakes of this encounter rising higher. "Let's talk about taking this to the next level," he finally said, as a slight smile creased his lips. But even as hope began to blossom within her, Lisa couldn't shake off a lurking feeling that Jenkins wasn't alone in this endeavor. What other shadows awaited her in the shifting landscape of their next steps? Lisa left Jenkins's office with a spark ignited within her, a strange mix of hope and apprehension twirling in her mind. For the first time, she felt the ground beneath her shift from fear to potential. Yet, as she walked back to her desk, the taste of victory was bittersweet. The conversation had expanded her resolve, but also deepened her awareness of the unseen walls yet to be scaled. Returning to her workspace, she sat down and began her review of the proposals that had inspired Jenkins's skepticism. Lines of text blurred as thoughts spiraled through her mind. Every detail now felt even more pivotal. How far could she take this momentum? Each tactic she'd proposed seemed both bold and fraught with inherent risks. But she felt alive in the challenge. The hours turned into an unexpected blend of exhilaration and doubt. Each minute spent refining her ideas left her questioning if they truly reflected the needs of the firm or if they were simply artifacts of her ambition. Ms. Caldwell's mantra echoed in her thoughts, urging a balance between aspiration and realism. The prospect of collaboration with Jenkins felt promising, yet a nagging self-doubt crept in. Would her ideas withstand scrutiny, or would the conversation shift the moment shadows entered the room? She stood up abruptly, shaking away the feelings that clouded her progress. Lisa decided to take a healthier approach to this potential collaboration. She recalled a lesson from a workshop focusing on emotional intelligence she had attended last year. This was a chance not just for professional gain, but personal growth. By recognizing her emotions and the reactions of others, she could guide conversations toward constructive outcomes. Determined to prepare thoroughly, Lisa reached out to colleagues who had previously expressed doubt about her proposals. She scheduled informal lunch meetings, eager to connect with their perspectives. Genuinely listening to their concerns would empower her, she hoped. What better way to construct a foundation than to gather insights directly from those who would participate in the change? As she navigated these discussions, she focused on sustaining transparency and fostering trust. The first lunch meeting was with Sarah, a colleague who often approached developments with caution. Sitting across from her, Lisa employed her newfound emotional intelligence. She practiced active listening, nodding and encouraging Sarah to dive deeply into her reservations. What do you feel needs to change for you to feel more confident? As Sarah spoke, Lisa's heart raced, not out of fear but anticipation. Each concern raised became an opportunity for dialogue, an invitation to mold ideas that could address those worries. If we can create a session that includes these voices, it might ease anxieties surrounding our approach, Lisa proposed carefully, gauging Sarah's reaction. Slowly but surely, Sarah's expression of skepticism started to soften, transforming instead into thoughtful contemplation. By the end of their conversation, Lisa felt lighter. They'd forged a budding understanding. Sarah agreed to co-facilitate with her in a partnering workshop aimed at preparing their colleagues for the pilot program's launch. But with every newfound alliance, a sharper edge of uncertainty sliced through her. Was she relying too heavily on goodwill? What stakes would their alliance entail? These questions lingered as shadows of doubt loomed at the back of her mind. As Lisa stepped into her next meeting, the small session with Jenkins where they would flesh out the next phases, she felt the weight of her choices. What would this powerful man think of her collaborations with others? Would he endorse her strategies, or would her desire for unity threaten his established order? Lisa took a deep breath, positioning herself at the edge of the room where Jenkins awaited. She was ready to present a new angle, but she knew that risking exposure in front of him might puncture the newfound synergy she'd begun building. Today, we discuss not just our plans, but how they will interlace with our team's voices, she began, her heartbeat quickening as she swallowed her uncertainties. The room was charged, and she felt reminders of her earlier panic. What do you mean by interlace? Jenkins pressed, his brows knitting together with inquiry. The feedback, she replied, steadying her breath, will drive us forward. Together, we'll discover insights that bridge our ambitions with collective abilities. The team must feel part of this journey, or else we risk creating divisions. She looked into Jenkins's eyes, searching for the glimmer of respect she had glimpsed before. But as she spoke, she felt a tightening in her chest, a premonition of the challenges that lay ahead, not just regarding Jenkins, but within herself. The success of this initiative demanded more than just professional collaboration. It called for a rigorous examination of her own values and motivations. As the conversation ignited, Lisa realized this was about more than ideas. It was a transformative step toward the leader she yearned to become. But just as she began to feel the rhythm of the dialogue, the door opened and a familiar face stepped in, bringing with them a reveal that would shatter her newfound calm. Excuse me, Lisa. The newcomer's voice sliced through the atmosphere with a jarring clarity. We need to talk about the recent decisions involving the pilot program. Lisa's pulse quickened. The stakes had just risen significantly. Would this be a setback or a pivotal moment? The uncertainty loomed heavy as she braced for impact. The unexpected interruption rattled Lisa, but she quickly resolved to confront whatever challenge lay ahead. The colleague who had entered, Charles, was well known for his strategic focus and direct approach. His presence, however, was a stark contrast to the collaborative atmosphere she'd just begun to create with Jenkins. "Charles," she greeted, forcing her voice to steady, "what's going on?" "I have concerns about the pilot program," he stated bluntly, his gaze shifting from Lisa to Jenkins. "We need to address some logistical issues before proceeding. The framework you've proposed seems overly ambitious, and quite frankly, it lacks adequate support for implementation." An uneasy tension filled the space. Lisa felt the air thicken around them. Her newfound confidence threatened to dissipate under the weight of Charles's challenge. Yet she had no intention of backing down. Months of hard work, self-discovery, and growth had led her to this moment. "Charles, your points are valid," she acknowledged. "But I believe that ambition drives success. Instead of focusing on what's lacking, why not discuss how we can fill those gaps together?" Jenkins shifted slightly, intrigued by Lisa's shift from defense to action. She could sense that he appreciated the way she managed the dynamic, further reinforcing her resolve. "I'm not disputing the ambition," Charles replied, "but you need a more robust plan. What do you have in mind if the partners retreat?" Lisa paused. Charles wasn't simply testifying to undermine her efforts. He was voicing a concern shared by many. "Let's invite them to collaborate on refining our approach," she offered. "Their insights could prove invaluable, and it shows that we're not just seeking approval, we're encouraging shared responsibility over the project." Jenkins interjected, "That could work, but there's more at stake. We must ensure that our proposal aligns with the firm's long-term goals and meets the existing demand." Finally, Lisa approached the conversation with a measured blend of optimism and realism. "Let's initiate a brainstorming session with the partners after retrieving their feedback from the recent lunch meetings. We can collate concerns and integrate their perspectives into our framework rather than waiting for them to voice their hesitations." A moment of silence hung in the air, holding the potential for a breakthrough or an impasse. The tension stirred, revealing the complexities that lay within their collaborative environment. "Fine," Charles conceded, crossing his arms. "But this requires total buy-in from everyone involved, or you'll face serious backlash when the project flounders. Don't underestimate the force of inertia in this firm's culture." Lisa struggled to suppress her frustration. It was true, but she had transformed enough over the previous months not to be afraid of inertia. "I understand, Charles, but if we don't seize this moment, we willingly choose stagnation. Let us work together to issue clear guidelines that provide structure without stifling innovation. I'm all in for this purpose, and I know I'm not alone." With her heart racing, she turned to Jenkins, who wore a thoughtful expression. "What do you think?" she probed. "Could we propose this approach?" After a moment of contemplation, Jenkins offered a small nod. "Yes, Lisa. Let's get this feedback loop rolling. It might rejuvenate everyone's investment in the outcome, which aligns perfectly with our ultimate goal." With Charles's concerns addressed and Jenkins's support confirmed, a sense of accomplishment washed over her. This moment marked another step in her evolution. She had stood her ground, converted doubt into dialogue, and opened pathways for collective success. Through the discussions that followed, Lisa gradually saw many of the partners embrace the spirit of collaboration she had hoped for. The pilot program became less about her ambition and more about the collective goal of addressing legal access disparities. Together they unraveled layers of apprehension, transforming obstacles into stepping stones. As the proposal molded itself into something robust and multifaceted, Lisa watched as her confidence solidified. Not through the validation of others, but through the willingness to adapt and lead. She was not just the housekeeper with an idea anymore. She was becoming a pivotal voice in the firm, and the exchange of power felt revitalizing. When the time finally came to present the finished framework, all eyes were on her. Partners and colleagues alike awaited her insights with anticipation. Instead of nerves, she felt a profound sense of ownership sweeping through the room. Today, we stand not just as a firm, but as advocates ready to dismantle barriers that restrict our clients. Let's make this journey our legacy, she declared, her voice unshakable and firm. The applause that followed was a symphony, an acknowledgement of her transformation, her ability to navigate a once daunting environment, and her refusal to remain invisible any longer. Lisa had accomplished what she had set out to do. She had fused ambition with collaboration to achieve something significant. In that moment, she realized her journey was not merely about creating a legal document for families. It was about forging connections, addressing deep-rooted issues, and embracing the evolution of her very identity. She had conquered the narrative she once felt constricted by, and now she stood poised for the challenges that lay ahead, equipped with resilience, tenacity, and the belief that she would not just participate in change, she would drive it. As she walked out of the room, a sense of peace settled within her. She had emerged from the shadows of self-doubt, laying claim to her rightful space in this world. There were more battles to face, further negotiations and challenges, but Lisa knew she would step into each one firmly, as a force of transformation forged by her own undeniable strength. And along that journey, she felt deeply that every individual has the potential to overcome, to lead, to transform, not only their lives, but the lives of others. This was just the beginning, and she was ready. Now, while this journey draws to a close, your own story is just beginning. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and share in this narrative of transformation. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your voice matters. And you must share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support and embrace the power of personal growth together. Don't wait even one more second to share. More second.